Just getting set up here, guys. Let's see what we can do. Let me get this set up. All right. So we're out here for the first live. Very exciting. Love it. Love it. Uh, so today, what we're going to talk about is a little bit of SAT math. Now, the thing I want to kind of go over about the SAT math, guys, is this obviously is a test to some degree of your math knowledge, right? You got to know some formulas. It's important to be, to have good foundation in algebra, in chemistry, not chemistry, in geometry, in trigonometry, right? We know that's important, but one of the things that is overlooked and kind of more important, I would say, when it comes to something like the SAT, is understanding the test. This is a game, right? That is the number one thing I want to stress in this live today, guys. The SAT is undoubtedly a game, right? Those that can play the game better win, right? So you can look at me as kind of like a chess grandmaster, right? I know how to play this game better than anybody else. I'm going to show you the tips and tricks that you need to know so that you can succeed in the game of the SAT. It's really important to make that clear because I think students, their natural inclination, you talk to a teacher, you talk to a parent, maybe they say, all right, Nick, you got to study your math formulas. You got to understand the concept of algebra and geometry. Yes, you do, right? You need the fundamentals. But once you get past the fundamentals, this just becomes a game of who can play the SAT game better than someone else. That's the most important thing. And that's the most important thing to remember. Um, I'm going to go into how you do that, but I just wanted to make that clear at the start. Now, another thing before I kind of get into some of our points here, the SAT, unfortunately, is designed in many ways to set you up for failure, right? There's a lot of trap questions. Say, for example, an algebra question where you solve for X and then the question wants X plus 2, right? That is sometimes a trap set up for students, right? They know a lot of students are going to know how to do the problem, but they're going to fail at the last moment in actually putting down the right answer, right? So the College Board is setting up the test with various traps across the math portion and across, of course, on English as well. But today we're talking about math. Those are going to be laid out all over the place. And it's your job as a student to avoid those traps, right? You want to look at what you're doing and say, is there a trap here? Is there a trick? How can I get through this easily? Right. This is all the strategizing of the SAT. Right. So let's go into some mindset things. Right. Like I was saying earlier, the SAT tests logic and efficiency, not just math. So you need to be efficient, right? You need to know how to use your calculator well. You need to know how to get through the material quickly so that you can get on to the next question. There's a lot of things that you need to do other than just know math, right? And we're going to go over some of that stuff. This is a simple one. Most of you probably know this. You don't want to leave any blanks. Even if it's a fill in, put an answer, right? I would recommend you pick a letter of the day. So if you have a certain letter that you think, is your favorite or just B, C, it honestly doesn't matter. You just want to say, all right, if I don't know an answer to a question, more time spent in that question is wasted time. If I have no idea how to do a math problem, I want to just pick an answer and move on. That seems like a simple thing and not that important. That's hugely, hugely important. Students that commit to that have a much better success in raising their score than students that will sit there for 5 minutes, try to figure it out, fail, and then have less time for other things that they do know, right? You can choose to do the questions out of order. So if you don't know an answer to a question, you feel like you could know it, right? You can easily just put, you mark it for review later, and you can go back to it. I personally would use that tool if I was taking the digital SAT when I do practice tests and stuff like that. I use that tool. Doesn't happen to me much, unfortunately, because I know the answer to pretty much every question instantly because I do the SAT all day. So that's not hyping myself up too much. But once you learn this kind of test, it's honestly a lot easier than you think. But it's really important that you prioritize your time. So doing easy questions first, doing things that you know can help with that prioritization, which is hugely important to getting your highest score. Like I was saying earlier, if you have no idea how to do a question, 5 seconds, move on. If you're stuck on a question and you feel like you're kind of close to an answer and you think you can put something down, ballpark it, right? Try to estimate. I know you don't like students don't like doing that, right? They want to have the exact right answer. Sometimes that is what the test necessitates, right? Guesstimating, drawing out diagrams, trying your best to figure something out. That is something that I think is hugely helpful on something like the SAT and can be really influential in improving your score. If you can get to a 50-50 on the 5 problems you don't know, right? Instead of getting all 5 wrong or maybe getting 1 right, you might get 2 or 3 right, and if you're at a 700, that brings you to a 750, right? So, hugely important. I think people leave that kind of stuff out all the time. Uh, Bite sizing is a hugely important strategy, right? A lot of these SAT math problems are extremely long, right? They're very verbose, right? There's a lot of different sentences, different clauses. Each one may be giving you a piece of information, right? You want to take that information and digest it in small chunks, right? Students laugh at me how I read SAT problems when I'm working with a student. I read them in small bits and pieces and I analyze each bit as I go along. That is how to best take the test. Reading an entire paragraph of information and trying to synthesize and digest it all at once, totally challenging to do, right? It's not something you want to do. You want to break it down into little pieces. The calculator, right? Hugely important tool on the test. I might do a whole separate video on that, but like the calculator is on the digital SAT, as you probably have heard, is hugely influential and extremely important, right? You can just get a lot of the answers simply with a calculator. Um, you don't want it to be a crutch, right? You can't do every problem in the calculator. They know how to design problems in a certain way where the calculator won't work. Usually it's very simple. You just put a lot of variables. If you have more than 2 variables, sometimes it's going to be pretty hard to use a calculator because Desmos cannot accept, 5 different variables and spit out an equation without numbers, right? So, learn how to use a calculator. And it's hugely important that you learn that, but don't become obsessed with it to the point where you don't know how to use anything else, right? There's a lot of handwritten math and diagramming and other tricks like plugging in various other things I'm going to go over that can be utilized when the calculator fails, right? So, keep that in mind. Also recognize problems that are time wasters, right? This is depending on your score. If you're shooting for an 800, that's not applicable, right? You have to do every problem. You have to get every problem right. If you're shooting for, say, a 700, right? This actually is important, right? If I want to get a 700 in the SAT math, I can recognize certain problems that are a big waste of my time. Now, if you know how to do it and you have the time, you should do it, right? But if you don't know how to do it and you feel like maybe I could do it if I spend 5 minutes or if I think about it, that's a decision making process. And this is where the practice and advice comes into play. You have to decide whether that's a wise decision or not, right? And then always ask yourself, can you plug in for the variable or the answer choice? Those are the other two huge strategies. Can you just use numbers to grind your way through the problem? Hugely important. All right, moving on. All right. Oh, no, I went backwards. All right, so plugging in for the variable. Let's go over one of the most important strategies off the rip here. What does that mean, right? So sometimes there's variables in the question and the answer choices, and a lot of times it uses the phrasing in terms of or is equivalent to. These problems, no one should ever get these wrong, right? Every single student should get these correct. It's absolutely a necessity. Hello, I have a comment in the chat. What's up? What's up? Thanks for joining. Uh, we can do this very simply, right? Uh, all you have to do, pick a number for a. You see this problem here, which expression is equivalent to 3 over a squared plus 1 over 2a plus 2 over a. You can pick a very simple number, right? You just identify the variable. You can plug in an easy number, 2, 3, 10, 1. 0 sometimes. You gotta be careful with 0, like in this problem, why would 0 be bad, right? 0 would be bad because 2 of the fractions would be undefined, which would be a big problem, right? So we don't want that, right? 0 would be bad here, but maybe 1 works, right? Let's try 1. So that would be 3 plus a half plus 2. So that would be 5.5. So now we just want to look for the answer choice that equals 5.5, right? Then you can go through and kind of do that. I think it's, let's see, C. No, yeah, C, right? Because that would be 11 over 2, right? Which is 5.5. So you can see I don't have to do the algebraic solving of getting a common denominator, right? There's a detailed way here on the bottom left how to do this, right? So your target value is what I produce when I put in 1 for A. So 3 plus a half plus 2, that was 5.5. Write that on the side, put that in a box. I'd also write A equals 1 on the side of my scrap paper, and then go through each answer choice calculating. So this is an important strategy, and this is probably, in my opinion, the best one other than Desmos. This is just absolutely huge. You could see a lot of people might struggle with this kind of problem who are in the 500 to 600 range. This is an easy way to get you past the 5 to 600 range, is just plug in for these variables. And so many students, I meet with students all the time. I talk to students, talk to parents, in person, social media. They don't do this. It's like, just make this easy, bruh. Like, this is so easy if you just plug in. Like, it's really not very hard. So let's see. Another thing, plugging in the answer choices, right? So this is a different version of the same strategy. So, when you have word problems and equations with numeric answer choices, so you could see A, B, C, D here are numbers, right? I can just try them out. You typically want to start with the ones in the middle because if they're too high or too low, you can quickly navigate yourself to the other two. So, for example, if my answer comes out too high, I might want to try a lower number or a higher number. There's some logic that you have to put into that. It's a denominator of a fraction. So, to make it bigger, you need a smaller number. You don't have to worry about that much. That's just a little bit of a helpful thing. If you have to just work through all of them, fine. Once one of them works, you can stop, right? So, there's only one of these that's going to work. So, you don't have to check all of them. If A works, you're good. Super amazing strategy that also people just don't use. They say this, I have to find a common denominator, or maybe I don't even know that. What do I do? And it's like, bruh, just plug in, you know. So make your life easy. That's one of the things, right? Like, why work hard when you can work smart? It's the best tip on the SAT that anyone could ever be given. It's like, just work smarter, not harder, you know. Let's talk about some things that you definitely need to know. These are more conceptual things. Now we're getting to some concepts after we went through some basic strategies, right? People always ask me, Nick, what do I really need to know, and what do I really, maybe don't need to know as well for the something like the SAT? You have to know slope intercept form of a line. You must know this. This is a must know thing for the SAT. You have to be comfortable with it. You need to be comfortable with, okay, I'm given 2 points, finding the equation of a line, parallel lines, perpendicular lines. I need to know all this stuff. There's just no way around it. Sometimes Desmos can get you around these, sometimes it can't, right? So on the harder problems, tangent lines to a circle that are perpendicular to the radius, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know that, Desmos is not going to help you, right? So there's things that you just need to know. You need to also be able to translate word problems. Each, every, per sometimes means a slope. Start, initial, beginning sometimes mean a y-intercept. So if they're describing the graph of, um, initial cost of renting a lawnmower, and it's, $300 to rent the lawnmower plus $20 an hour, like the y-intercept would be 300, and then it would be going up a slope of 20. Those kind of things you also need to know. You also need to understand functions. Um, f of x equals y. Each input has one output. So if you put in 2 for x and you get 4 for y, that's an input and an output. And a lot of times in those problems, you can plug in values, which is hugely important. Let's talk about the slope intercept form of a line. So this is a little bit of what I was saying earlier. In the standard xy coordinate plane, what is the slope of a line that is perpendicular to a line passing through the points -3, 5 and 1, 1, right? So this is a perfect example. This is going to be a question on the SAT. It's guaranteed that you're going to have to encounter this kind of question. So you have to know how to do this. What do you do here, right? Pretty simple. You have to find the slope. right? So, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Uh, there's really no way around that. You could do this in Desmos. It's a little bit more of an advanced Desmos trick of find the exact equation of the line using a table. I'm going to show that in a different video. If you're interested in that, throw a comment in the chat. I'll definitely take that in consideration. But this is something you got to know. Pretty simple. Don't really need Desmos, but could use it. Here's a function, right? So it's another very popular topic on the SAT. The function g is defined by g of x equals 5x minus 3. What is the value of g of x plus g of 7? So yeah, you have to plug in 7, find the answer. I think it's actually a typo. Probably should say g of something, but you get the point. Take in a function, you take this x value here, this value in the middle, right? You take this value, you plug it in for x. Let's talk about some graph shortcuts. So a lot of graph questions on the SAT. This is transformation rules. So you guys want to review these: shifting upward, shifting downward, shifting to the left, shifting to the right, flipping upside down over the x-axis, y-axis. Review this stuff, know it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. This is the kind of stuff that you guys got to know. This is an example of how that would work. You can see the graph has been shifted downwards. Actually, you don't know if it's downwards or upwards. So let's see, 1, 2, it's upwards 3 or downwards 3, right? So it's probably going to be D. That needs to be labeled a little bit better, but you can see that kind of transformation. All right, let's go over some algebra stuff, right? What do we need to know for algebra? Isolating a variable, right? I hope people know this. If you feel like I don't know how to isolate a variable, like solve for x, you got to go back to the beginning, right? That's where you got to go back. You're probably, if you don't know how to do that, you're probably scoring in the 400s. You got to go back to algebra. You got to study that stuff. You got to learn it. You could use something like Khan Academy, go back to your algebra notes, learn how to solve for X. That's a hugely important building block. I'm not going to sit here and go over that. But you can see here are the basics. You have to use PEMDAS, combine like terms, same operations on both sides, cross multiply. All those kind of skills are hugely important, right? Proportions, another thing that students struggle with on the SAT. Ratios, 1 to 2 equals a half. 2 to 4 is the same thing as 1 to 2, which is also a half. Label units, be consistent. Use your brain, right? Try to really think things through. When you have a word problem, like something like 5 pens cost $3, think of it as a real life problem, right? Don't think of all SAT problems as something in the ether, right? It's something I don't understand. I don't get it. What am I supposed to do here? Place yourself in the prompt, right? Like, okay, I need to buy these pens, right? That helps you get the ratios and proportions correct. Let's talk a little bit about systems of equations. System of equations typically on the SAT are 2 lines. Either they're intersecting, where there's one solution, they're parallel, and then there's no solution, or they're the same line and there's infinite solutions. You have to know those 3 like by memory. Like as soon as you see a problem and it says infinite solutions, my goal is to make the 2 lines the same. I see this system of equations problem and it says no solution. I know my goal is to make the 2 lines parallel. If it's one solution, I might have to find the point of intersection. That has to be like an instantaneous recognition. This is part of the training of the SAT. You see it, you know exactly what to do. You have several methods to solve system of equations. If you have to solve substitution, so that's where you solve one of the variables, like you can plug in here in this problem, for example, you could plug this 5a plus 1 in for this b, distribute, and get your answer for a. You could also use the stack and solve or the elimination method, where you place the 2 equations on top of each other, subtract or add, eliminate one of the variables, and move on. If you're saying, Nick, I don't really know what those mean, go back and study, right? You got to go back and study. I could teach you all this. We could teach you all this. Your math teacher could teach you all this. You probably learned it at some point in time. You must have, right? This is general part of algebra that everyone learns. If you don't remember it, you have to remember it for the SAT. There's nothing else I could say. This is one of those things. Sometimes you can get around it with Desmos, right? Actually, probably could get around this one easily with Desmos by making A and B, X and Y, putting them in and solving, right? It's for a different video, but make sure that you keep that in mind, that you're making your life really easy by knowing certain things. And this is one of those certain things, this page here, that you understand that stuff. All right, some rapid fire hacks. Let's get into rapid fire mode here. Percents to decimals. You got to know that conversion, right? Exponents. You got to know same base rules, right? So you have the same base, like x to the fourth times x to the third. When you multiply exponents, you add. When you divide exponents, you subtract. When you take a power to another power, you multiply. You have to know that stuff, right? Quadratics. You have to know how to factor. You also need to know the vertex form. If you don't know the vertex form, if you don't know what it is, it's y equals x minus h squared plus k, where h k is the vertex. If that sounds like Greek to you, go back and study it. I don't know what else to say. You got to know that. You got to know it. If you can't memorize that, you're going to lose a point on the test. Like, it's just going to be a lost point. A lot of times, just ask you which one of these equations represents the vertex as a constant, and it's just in the vertex form. You pick the one that's in vertex form. You have the answer. Geometry, rapid fire trick there. You need to draw pictures. Every time on geometry, they're going to give you half the problems with no picture. They're going to be talking about a circle, a triangle, similar triangles, A, B, C, and D, E, F, and they're just going to label the angle. And if you don't draw it, it's almost impossible, right? I would draw it, and I would easily do that problem in 2 seconds, but I would still draw it, right? So you have to draw stuff on geometry problems. Um, on probability problems, you can use complements. So you can use the 1 minus P naught. Probability problems on the SAT usually are pretty tricky. It's something that you need to get comfortable with. I think students generally are not super comfortable with probability. It's something that comes up on the harder problems. They ask a lot of problems about random percents and probability things. Like, for example, with percents, they would ask you something like, the price of oil was X in 2014, and in 2015 it went down 20%, and then in 2016 it went up 30%. How much did the price of oil change? And the answer is not 10%. So see if you can figure that out. Throw it in the chat. All right, so that was my rapid fire SAT live about some math tricks. Hopefully you guys benefited from this. I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions, right? People are probably like, what was this guy talking about on half of this? If you have a question, throw it in the comments. Shoot me a message. I'm happy to help you guys. There's way more tricks than this. I just scratched the surface here. I wanted to do a quick live and throw some of these tricks out there. So definitely throw a like on the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.